anxiety, disquiet, disease, sand shifting menacingly beneath your feet, where vigilance is the only means of effectively protecting yourself. Sounds scary, huh? Yet that's a condition that affects over 20% of all dogs. And it affects a lot of humans as well. In fact, depression and elevated anxiety is the #2 debilitating disease worldwide. And again, it doesn't just afflict humans. It does our dogs as well. Today I'm going to talk about canine pharmacotherapy, giving help to our dogs. And I'm going to spend the next couple of days talking about it because it's so very, very important that you understand that if you have a dog who suffers from generalized anxiety disorder, who suffers from separation-related disorder, otherwise known as separation anxiety, fearful aggression, phobias, afraid of storms, loud noises, fireworks. If you have an animal that chews on itself, chases its tail nonstop, stargazes, any sort of peculiar and what you deem as very unusual and oftentimes very unsafe, whether it be for someone else or your dog, then pay attention for the next couple of days because I'm going to spend time on it so you understand it, what's going on, but more importantly, what can you do about it? And then I'll wrap up canine pharmacotherapy on Monday with some heartwarming stories, something to give you hope for your dogs. Because without hope, what do we have? We have nothing. Canine pharmacotherapy is a dark subject. I'm going to try and keep it as light as I can, but I don't want to disrespect it. We're talking about a mental illness in your dog. How's that happen? How does that happen? Well, we did it. So go ahead and point your finger at you. I'll go ahead and point mine at me. We did it. We humans. Yeah. We humans are a strange creature. And because we took an animal from a wolf, there's no wolves out there on antidepressants, benzodiazepines, agonists. There's none. We took a creature and morphed it through all the millennia till finally it doesn't even really work for us. Now it fills a codependent emotional void. And because of that, we destroyed its genetic baseline. We've made these creatures so weak, so dependent upon us, so unable to handle the trials in life, the many things that are thrown at it, living in a human world, an alien world, that now we have animals being born, already born, predisposed to the mental illnesses, the phobias, the depression I speak of, the GADs. Absolutely. It's sad. And when you own one of these dogs, no matter what you say, no matter how much you pet the dog, no matter how much you tell the dog you love it, no matter how many times you say it's okay, well, it's not. And the same thing goes with people who are afflicted with this as well. You can tell them it's all going to be okay. But it's not. Not to them, because that's a lie. And that's why I call it, in a book that I will be writing hopefully here in the near future, The Impenetrable Lie. Is it going to be about canine pharmacotherapy? What we need to do to help save our dogs who can't save themselves. So again, let me hop back real quick because I want to spend the day talking a little bit about how did we get here and why are we here when we can do something about it, because we're not. And that's my angst. It's where my anger builds up. Because I've been doing canine pharmacotherapy for 40 years at a very high level. I owned my own veterinary hospital. I had veterinarians working for me. I'm not a veterinarian, but they were my employees. They worked for me. I was hand-selected by some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world to study the effects of antidepressants, benzodiazepines, agonists, pain medications, post-op medications, you name it, to see what we could do to use them as a facilitator to change the dog's condition, to make it better, to achieve some sort of quality of life, to mitigate the safety risk to humans and even to the dog itself. So let me start with that for today. Tomorrow I'll get into what is it as far as how does it affect the dog, and then Monday, what the heck do we do about it? Because we need to do something, because we're not doing enough. Okay, so what is canine pharmacotherapy? Pharma, medications, with therapy, behavior modification. You should never have a discussion about using any sort of psychopharmaceutical medications with your dog without discussing therapy to go with it. At the end of the day, in pharmacotherapy, medications such as all the ones I just listed previously serve nothing more than to facilitate the behavioral change in your dog. Many dogs are not able to cope with the world that surrounds them. They're not able to handle and suppress stressors that are constantly affecting them. Day in, day out, hour in, hour out. We subject our dogs to the ninth circle of hell on a daily basis, many of these dogs. Not all, of course, but the ones I'm talking about. Genetics. It all starts with genetics. We call it G by E. Genetics by environment. And so when I mention genetics, if you've got a purebred dog and you've bought from this breeder who's been breeding these lines for years and years and years, and they got all these titles on their dog, I don't care. You need to hear something right now. Anytime you either adopt a puppy, save a puppy off the streets, or you purchase a puppy, you're rolling the genetic dice. There are no guarantees. Those days, that ship has sailed, and it sailed decades and decades ago. And our pursuit to create that thing to be a surrogate human, a little person in a fur coat, they have the next super doodle. Doodle doodle. It's not just a doodle anymore. Now it's a doodle doodle doodle. It's an Aussie doodle. It's a Snorky. It's a Tweenie. Anything with a cool name. And let's go ahead and miniaturize it while we're at it. Yeah, let's take that big, powerful dog and make it to pint size. Yeah, when you do that, you shrink the spirit. You shrink everything about that animal. Everything. So again, it's genetics. Genetics. When you think of environment, we think of nature, nurture. Well, let me tell you another thing that we now know. We know this as of the last 5 years. That when it comes to these dogs, and again, now we're finding out again, and know this, everything I'm going to say about a dog applies to humans. So I'm not going to go back and forth saying for humans as well. Take that as a stance. If I mention this can affect your dog, it can affect you the exact same way. The physiological stress response is non-specific. Hear that? Non-specific. It affects your dog the exact same way it affects you and vice versa. So I won't go back and forth on those. But in the womb is where some of this is created. In other words, the environment starts actually in the womb. Yeah, it begins in the circulatory environment shared in utero with the one's biological mother. I told you in a video series a couple weekends ago, I believe, in which even in the womb, we're competing with our mothers. We're trying to rob mom of vital nutrients. We already know we're going to be born into the land and into the law of limited resources, the evolutionary rule of mine. We know it before we're born. We know that we're going to have to be competitive to survive. We already know these things, or at least nature does. And so she creates conditions already in the womb. They've taken young adults who suffer from clinical levels of depression. And these are adopted young adults. They were adopted at birth. Their adoptive parents, no issues, no depression, no sign of it. When they track it back, in 8 out of 10 cases, the biological mother or the biological father is suffering from depression. but in most cases, it's the mother. The father's environment, the mother is in the womb. And this is powerful, guys. It's really powerful because this could set a precedence for what we look for and how I always preach. It's so vitally important that you take a look at mom when you get your puppy. You know a little bit about mom, or you have a whole lot of trust in that breeder's abilities. Because mom is going to tell you a whole lot. And grandma's going to tell you a lot as well. We have to pay attention. It starts in the womb. So in other words, this animal is born already with brain neurons and genes that under the same circumstances that you could interact with the environment, their genes get excited. They see it differently. They have genes X, Y, and Z. You got A, B, and C. They have long-term potentiation in fearful situations. You don't. They already have it. We see that somewhat in nature, only to the degree in which nature created what's called an evolutionary stable strategy. I put that out before. We do not have all producer personalities in animals and all scroungers. You can't. You can't. You can't have that in humans. You can't have that in dogs. You got to have a little bit of both. You got to have some of the stuff in the middle there. But in the wild, the big difference is that only strong genes are perpetuating over and over and over again. So those offspring inherit the traits that say, hey, I have a better chance of surviving. I have a better chance of dealing with this situation. I have a better chance of reproducing. Those try to survive. Nature tries to keep those genes. She tries not to allow the weaker genetic species or animal, individual, to breed. She does all she can to stop that from happening. But we do it. We do it all the time. We breed week to the week, a low-ranking scrounger with another low-ranking scrounger. We do that generation after generation. And next thing you know, we have animals that are already born. I remember 30 years ago, I did not have to do pharmacotherapy on any dog below the age of 2. It's not uncommon that I'm doing it at dogs 8 months of age. Yeah, sad. Okay, so it starts off genetically, and you need to really understand that, because so many times when people think that they have a dog who's very fearful, especially if they adopted that dog, they picked that dog up from an animal shelter or rescue, then the misperception or misconception that they have is that the animal was abused. Granted, there are animals that do suffer from PTSD. There are animals that are abused. There are animals that were raised in unfavorable conditions. But they also have animals that were subjected to the exact same conditions. And yet, they are not phobic. They are not unusually fearful. Yeah, they've done it, again, with humans. Carnage of war. Same two troops in the same foxhole experience the same war. All the carnage of war. A year later, one has PTSD, the other one does not. They're tracking this. And they're starting to study many things. There's different sides of the podium, as there always is, which is, that's the way it always should be. Peer review, peer challenge. But what they're starting to wonder is this, the old chicken before the egg type thing. They're studying the hippocampus. The hippocampus is a part of the brain that can be associated, or an example can be used, it's like a keyboard. It's really vital for putting information into that computer and taking information out of it. They're finding that a lot of these humans who suffer from PTSD are missing 40% volume, hippocampal volume. Yeah, the darn thing has shrunk 40%. Or did it shrink? Or were they born with a smaller hippocampus that cannot withstand the assaults of life? Yeah, so it's going back and forth. More and more are starting to lean towards the fact that maybe they were born with it. As the day stands, as me shooting this video, all the research I've done, all the colleagues I've talked to, still believe it's the fact that it's the stress response and pathological stress. Okay, so we start with G, then we do have some environment. What's the environment? For animals, one of the most upsetting things for them is typically acute physical crises. That's what upsets an animal. Now, we humans have lived long enough, well enough, and are smart enough to mobilize our stress response, to mobilize stress, to become stressed over a mere thought. But your dog can't. Thank goodness. But we can. So for dogs, it started off, and most animals, it's an acute physical crisis. If you're an elk and some wolf charges out of the forest and starts chasing you, You're stressed. If it reaches up with his fangs and rips your guts out and your innards are dragging along the ground, yeah, you're more than super stressed at this point here. But nevertheless, you keep fighting on and keep fighting on, because that's what the job is of the physiological stress response that we share with animals. Is the exact same thing. So environment does play a major role, but what it simply does is it sets the stage. It sets the stage. You're already predisposed. The actors were in place. The lights were in place. It just doesn't pull back. The environment serves to pull back the curtains and expose the animal. And then under certain conditions, they start to now unravel. They start to have a pathological stress. Pathological. So we also have animals who, in that environment, a lot of times in pharmacotherapy, we will use a couple solutions to solve the issue with the animal, or to help to benefit the animal with the issue. And that is, you can avoid the provocative event. Whatever that event is in life that causes the animal to become super stressed or super fearful, you can avoid it altogether. Again, it'd be like me saying, you telling me right now that you're super claustrophobic. Well, I'd probably just give you advice, stay out of tight spaces. But let's say you can't do that. Or let's say your owners won't let you. Now what do you do? If you can't avoid the provocative event or the provocative stimuli or stimulus, then you must intervene on your animal's behalf, hence pharmacotherapy. Hence why. That's called intervention. Intervention. And sometimes we have to do that. And why does it happen? Because animals are subjected, like us, to pathological stress. Pre-COVID, 6 in 10 Americans were suffering from pathological stress. 6 in 10 Americans were on antidepressants. I haven't been able to find out what that number is now, but I can only imagine. After the year that we've been through, probably more than that. Way more than that. So Americans are turning to drugs to help them get through life. To help them. But see, that's one of the problems also with dogs. Is the exact same client, and I have treated, know this please, thousands of dogs, not a few hundred, 4 decades, baby, 4. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here, and you need to pay attention to this if you're one of those. Here's a very sad fact. Why are dogs in the state they are now? I already talked about weakening genetic baseline. I talked about they can't avoid the environment because they're living with a human being who can't make the difficult decision to possibly rehome the dog, to remove the dog from the provocative event or the stimulus. But on top of that, we have humans who have a big pharma bias. Yeah, but here's the funny part. The same human who cops that attitude is the same one shoving 80 milligrams fluoxetine down their throat on a daily basis. I run into that all the time. Kira and I worked for over 2 years to produce a canine pharmacotherapy program in which I could help other trainers, non-veterinarians, even veterinarians, it doesn't matter. I could help people evaluate dogs to determine are their behaviors not in line with species typical behaviors and what to do about that. And I cannot tell you, I said uncle. Yeah, Kira and I said uncle. We were trashed from one end of the internet to the next, continually assaulted, my children, my family, everyone, by people who call themselves professionals or nothing even near that. People who say they have PhDs, so what? We were trashed horribly because of the big pharma attitude. Oh, big pharma, always trying to do this, medicate that. Well, I'm here to tell you, I have treated dogs that if you had their condition, you would take any cocktail I could come up with to give you some damn relief, or you shove a damn gun in your throat. So if you cop that attitude and you own a dog that actually needs medications, then get off this video right now. And there, don't you post anything on my platform. I live and breathe this. This is my life. This is what I have dedicated to do. It's a dark corner. I'm in it pretty darn much by myself. But this is what I do. And I'll not tolerate any narrow-minded, uneducated crap. If your dog needs medication, then you should be the first in line. And I'm going to hope that the next 2 days will give you the education so that you will do that. You will do that courageously. Because no one wants to do it, but you have to do it. You have to. But it's that bias that we have. Even though, again, pre-COVID, 6 in 10 Americans were on antidepressants. Yeah, we take them. But by golly, I'm not going to medicate my dog. No way do I want to medicate my dog. Man, do I get pushback on that. It's unbelievable. Okay, but that's okay. So my job is to make sure that after I teach you about canine pharmacotherapy, we won't be given that pushback. We're going to be the stewards that we promised that dog we would be when we brought it in our house. Not part-time stewards, not biased stewards. You brought it into your household for better or worse. It does not have the ability. Humans do. They can leave you. They can divorce you. Your dog can't. I wish they could, but they can't. So you either avoid the provocative event or stimulus, or you intervene. So you have to intervene. What's another problem that's causing this lack of canine pharmacotherapy done at the level that's supposed to be done in this country? Lack of know-how. Yeah, lack of know-how. It is not something that is promulgated widely. The veterinarians that worked for me were not trained in the use of behavioral medications all the way through. Yes, they had some conceptual knowledge. They knew what an antidepressant was, what was an SSRI, what was a TCA. They knew benzos, they knew medications, they knew that. But they were not trained in veterinary school on what to look for in the animal. Can you make an accurate diagnosis as to what this animal is afflicted with? And then once you know that, what are you going to do about it? In other words, what are you going to do with the therapy? Because let me tell you something about an animal that's suffering from a mental illness, and you'll learn this tomorrow. You can't love it out of the animal. Okay, that's another problem that we have. Not just lack of know-how, but willful. Willful. Because the information's out there. You can learn it. I am not a veterinarian, and I know it. And I'll stand toe-to-toe with any veterinarian and anyone out there that calls themselves an expert. I'll stand toe-to-toe. You hear me? I'm live right now. Toe-to-toe, baby. Because I made it a point to study this half of my life. More than half of my life. No, I'm not that old. Although the stress can make you old. Yeah. So you can't love it out of the animal. You know, that's shoved down our throats all the time in poems, books, songs. All you need is a little love. No. This is a mental illness. It needs a whole lot more than that. Because it's an actual physiological problem with neurochemicals in the brain. Yeah, it has a problem with signaling, communicating with other brain cells. Has lack of neurotransmitters. Or we have receptors that are not responding to neurotransmitters, and now you have the brain cell itself reuptaking most of those, try and use them again later. When you cannot properly assimilate the information flowing in your head because your brain's not working properly, what do you think is going to happen? That's how we came up with the word paranoid, depressed, manic, suicidal. Because you cannot properly assimilate all the information flowing through your senses. And remember what cognition is? It is nothing more than a mental transformation of sensory input into knowledge about your environment and then a flexible application of that knowledge. But you're not able to do that. You see the glass is half empty. That's why at some point, when the dog gets to a certain point, training fails, love fails. It fails. It fails. It's the impenetrable lie. That's what I keep telling you that. It fails. This is a real physical problem. Okay? If someone cut off my arm right now, love isn't going to heal that. I'm just telling you. No, I'm going to need a tourniquet just to be able to make it to. Let a first responder get here, then I'm going to need a whole lot of medications, a whole lot of pain medication. I'm going to need a whole lot of stuff. You're not going to love Bryan back to health. You know, there's a lot of loving dog owners out there. God bless you. And I love you for it. But I just want you to know something. When you're dealing with a dog with a mental illness at the levels that I see, You cannot love that out of them. And you cannot train that out of them. Dogs are immune to your input when they reach a certain level in their physiological stress response. And we're going to learn a whole lot about that tomorrow. What does that baby do? That antiquated system. We've evolved. Dogs have evolved. It hasn't. That is the thing that I will believe will never, ever change on the planet Earth. Good God, if we lost that, we're done. It is game over. Right then and there. So some things refuse to change because it doesn't need to change. It's the way it is. Guys, we got to do something about this, okay? We have to. So I preached here a little bit today because it's on my heart. This is what I do. I don't like doing it, honestly. I'd much rather just do heel, sit down, and stay. I do love it when we're able to help dogs, and you're going to learn about one of them on Monday. I talk about a dog named Snow White. You can read the blogs I have on our website. You can read about Sweet Elsie. Oh, God. It's hard for me to even talk about her without tearing up. You can talk about Walter. Watch for Walter. Had a Gad. Gads are horrible. Hypervigilance. Always on the alert. The only time you don't have that is when you finally crash and just pass out. But even then, you don't get into the slow wave of sleep. It's horrible. Like Robert Sapolsky said in his book, Why Ulcers Don't Get Zebras. It's disquiet, disease, sand shifting menacingly beneath your feet, where constant vigilance is the only means of effectively protecting yourself. That's horrible. Horrible. Okay, guys, happy Saturday, by the way. I didn't say that at the start of this video. I am going to smile because I know you're out there and I know you're going to be doing what you need to do for your dog's sake. I will be putting it out to you tomorrow. I'm going to tell you exactly how the stress response works, give you a little Cliff Note version, otherwise I could be 900 videos trying to get this thing done. Cliff Note version on that, what do we need to do about it? Then on Monday, same thing. What do we need to do about it? So that when you go to your veterinarian, no matter where you live, you need to say, hey, so my dog is suffering from separation-related disorder. And Bryan put out this video. You need to share it with him, or you can say, he's recommending that my dog go on this medication. And then he's recommending that I perform this kind of therapy with my dog. Why would I do that? Because my dog has established undesired, unsafe, and unmanageable coping skills. I now need to erase those, like rebooting a computer, and put new ones in. And guys, one last little thing, and I'll put it out again tomorrow. Here's one of the really neat things about canine pharmacotherapy. Much easier doing pharmacotherapy with a dog than it is with a human. Number one reason, dogs don't even know they're on anything. There you go. So nothing's going to be made up. Any behavioral change you see as a consequence of that medication or the therapy that you're doing in combination with that medication is real. And when you get to a certain point, the other good thing is, then come off the medication. Yeah. It's a rare day, a very rare day, in which a dog has to remain on medication for its life. If it does, simply, dog has a physiological disorder, period. It just cannot produce the levels of neurotransmitters or brain signaling that it needs to. Kind of like a diabetic. Can't produce the insulin, you have to produce it for them. Synthetic. But outside of that, I would say out of the thousands I've worked with, that many had to remain on medication for their lives. So again, this is a short-term thing. It's not long-term. You can get through it. Gotta get the dogs over it. Okay, so tune in tomorrow. We're going to talk about it intervening because we're going to assume that you can't avoid it. I will talk a little bit about that, but we're going to talk about intervention. How does this physiological stress response work? How does it affect my dog? At what levels will my dog become immune to my input, to my training? Why it will ignore me when I say it's okay, it's all fine, and knock it off and go lay down? Why it continues to attack otherwise? And then what can we do about it? What can we do? So stay tuned for the next 2 days. And then after that, come Tuesday, that'll be day number 365 because today's number 362. So tune in for that as well. Okay, guys. Got any questions, shoot them to me. Bryan with a Y at tamingthewild.com. And pay attention to these next couple days. Be safe.